Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the realm of history and shattering some of the most widespread myths. You know, history is a tricky thing. It's not always as it seems, and sometimes the stories we hear are more legend than truth. For years on Mythbusters, Jamie and I have put all sorts of crazy ideas to the test, from exploding watermelons to concrete canoes. We've blown stuff up, crashed stuff, and generally made a mess in the name of science. And today we're bringing that same spirit of inquiry to the world of history. From famous figures to iconic events, history is full of misconceptions. Over the years, these myths have become so ingrained in our collective consciousness that we often accept them as fact without question. But just like any good myth, there's often more to the story than meets the eye. So buckle up and get ready to debunk some myths you might have believed your whole life. Let's kick things off with a real doozy, the story of Marie Antoinette and her alleged dismissive words. Let them eat cake. Picture this, it's 1789, the French people are starving, and Marie Antoinette, the Queen, hears about their plight. It's a powerful image, right? The out-of-touch Queen? More concerned with her lavish lifestyle, the phrase has become synonymous with callous disregard for the less fortunate. But here's the thing, there's no evidence she ever actually said those words. It seems like a classic case of propaganda. During the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette became a target of intense criticism. This line, whether she said it or not, played perfectly into that narrative. So, if Marie Antoinette didn't say let them eat cake, who did? Well, the truth is, the phrase itself was already in circulation long before Marie Antoinette's time. Similar sentiments can be found in various forms dating back to the 17th century. One theory suggests that the phrase was actually attributed to Marie Thérèse, the wife of Louis XIV, long before Marie Antoinette even set foot in France. Another theory points to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a prominent philosopher of the time, who mentions a great princess suggesting that the starving populace eat brioche, a type of enriched bread, in his autobiography, Confessions. While Rousseau doesn't name the princess, the anecdote certainly bears a striking resemblance to the Marie Antoinette story. It's important to note that Marie Antoinette, while known for her love of fashion and luxurious lifestyle, was also engaged in charitable works and expressed concern for the poor. While her efforts may not have always been effective, it's unfair to paint her as completely indifferent to the plight of the common people. The French Revolution was a complex and tumultuous period, and Marie Antoinette, like many historical figures, became an easy target for propaganda and misinformation. It's a reminder that history is often written by the victors, and that even the most enduring stories should be approached with a healthy dose of skepticism. The story of Marie Antoinette and the "let them eat cake" quote is a prime example of how easily historical myths can take hold and persist for centuries. It's a cautionary tale about the power of propaganda and the importance of critical thinking when it comes to historical narratives. So the next time you hear someone utter that infamous phrase, remember that it's more likely a product of revolutionary propaganda than a reflection of Marie Antoinette's true character. History is full of these kinds of misconceptions, and it's up to us to dig deeper, question what we've been told, and uncover the truth, or at least get a little closer to it. And that's what we're here to do today, folks. Join me as we bust more historical myths and separate fact from fiction. Up next, we're traveling to the land of the Vikings, and trust me, you're not going to believe what we uncover there. Stay tuned. All right, Mythbusters, let's set sail for the land of fjords, long ships, and of course, Vikings. When we think of Vikings, fierce warriors with helmets adorned with horns.
Yeah, about those horns. Turns out that iconic image is about as historically accurate as a unicorn riding a skateboard. It's the stuff of legends and Hollywood blockbusters, but not historical reality.
So where did this horned helmet misconception come from? Well, there are a few theories. Some historians believe it might trace back to ancient Roman accounts. Another theory suggests it gained traction in the 19th century during Romantic nationalism in Europe. So, if Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, what did they wear? Archaeological evidence suggests Viking helmets were made of leather or metal, simpler than movie versions. Think practical, protective helmets useful in battle. The famous Gjermundbu helmet, found in Norway in 1943, dates back to the 10th century. Made of iron, it features a rounded cap with a simple nose guard, no horns. This helmet provides valuable insight into actual Viking headgear.
Vikings may have adorned helmets with feathers or animal crests for ceremonies, but big horns, not practical for a warrior needing mobility and clear vision. A blow to those horns could spell disaster. Vikings likely chose practical headgear.
The truth is, the Great Wall is incredibly long, over 13,000 miles. That's like stretching a line all the way across the United States more than 5 times. It's an incredible feat of engineering. But here's the thing. Even though it's long, it's not that wide. In fact, it averages around 20 to 30 feet across. That's about the length of a school bus. So, while the Great Wall is massive, it's not exactly a giant white stripe across the planet. From space, it blends in with the surrounding landscape, making it tough to spot with the naked eye. Narrator, welcome back, Mythbusters. Today, we're tackling a misconception that's been floating around for ages. Can you actually see the Great Wall of China from space? It's a question that's sparked debate and captured imaginations for years. Now, when we talk about seeing something from space, we need to define what we mean by space. Are we talking about a low Earth orbit, like where the International Space Station hangs out? Or are we talking about all the way from the moon? Because that's a heck of a lot farther.
Now I know what you're thinking. But Adam, I've seen photos of the Great Wall from space. And you're not wrong, there are images out there, but there's a catch. Many of those photos were taken from low Earth orbit around 100 miles up. Even then, it's still incredibly difficult to spot. Astronauts have said that seeing the Great Wall from that distance is like trying to find a single hair on a friend's head. Possible, but definitely not easy. So what about those super clear photos you might have seen? Well, many of them were taken with powerful telephoto lenses or enhanced later with image processing software. Those techniques can bring out details that wouldn't be visible to the naked eye. To put it simply, the myth that the Great Wall is easily visible from space with the naked eye, busted. It's just too narrow and blends in too much with its surroundings. But hey, don't let that disappoint you. There are plenty of other man-made structures you can see from space. Cities, for example, light up at night like giant firefly constellations. And large bridges, especially those spanning across water, can be visible from low Earth orbit. In fact, some astronauts have reported seeing the pyramids of Giza from space. Now, those are some seriously impressive structures. They're massive and reflect sunlight in a way that makes them stand out from the surrounding desert. So, while the Great Wall might not be the space-viewing spectacle it's often made out to be, it's still an incredible feat of human ingenuity. And hey, it gives us a chance to bust another myth and explore the wonders of space exploration.
Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France, the conqueror of Europe, the man who could field an army faster than you could make a sandwich.
He's a legend, a giant in the history books. But there's one thing history seems to have shrunk: his height.
You've all heard the jokes, the stories, the idea that Napoleon was, well, vertically challenged.
Turns out, a lot of that comes down to good old-fashioned propaganda. You see, the British, Napoleon's arch-nemesis, weren't above a little psychological warfare. And what better way to undermine a fearsome emperor than to, well, make him seem a little less fearsome?
So they spread rumors, cartoons, all sorts of things depicting Napoleon as this tiny tyrant trying to compensate for something.
And you know what? It kind of worked. The image stuck. And even today, people picture Napoleon as a short king with a big attitude. But here's the thing. By the standards of his time, Napoleon wasn't short at all. Now, measuring historical figures isn't always an exact science. I mean, we can't exactly stick Napoleon on a stadiometer and call it a day. But we do have some pretty reliable sources. His height was recorded as 5 feet 2 inches in French units, which translates to about 5 feet 6.5 inches in modern measurements. That might not seem tall by today's standards, but back then it was perfectly average. In fact, some accounts even suggest that Napoleon was taller than his own guards, which, let's be honest, would have been a pretty smart tactical move for someone wanting to project an image of power. It's like those platform shoes they used to wear back in the day. You add a few inches, suddenly everyone takes you a little more seriously, except in Napoleon's case, he didn't need the platform shoes. He had the military genius and the charisma to back it up. But that doesn't make for as good a story, does it? And thus the myth of the short-tempered shorty emperor was born. It's funny, isn't it, how a little bit of misinformation can stick around for centuries. The idea of Napoleon as this tiny terror has become so ingrained in popular culture that it's hard to separate fact from fiction. But that's what we do here at Mythbusters, right? We dig into the nitty-gritty, the historical details, the actual evidence. And the evidence shows us that Napoleon, while not a giant, wasn't the pocket-sized emperor history often paints him to be. He was a man of his time, with the height to match. So the next time you see a cartoon of Napoleon looking up at everyone, remember, there's more to the story than meets the eye. Sometimes the truth is even more interesting than the myth. And in Napoleon's case, the truth is, he was a force to be reckoned with, no matter his height.
William Tell, the Swiss hero, the man who could shoot an apple off his son's head with a single arrow.
It's a story that's been told and retold for centuries. A tale of courage, skill, and a father's love. But is it true? Or is it just another one of those historical myths that's been passed down through generations?
The story goes that William Tell, a skilled archer, refused to bow down to the hat of Gessler, the tyrannical Austrian Vogt, who had it placed on a pole.
As punishment, Tell was forced to shoot an apple off his own son's head. Talk about pressure.
And of course, the legend says Tell succeeded, splitting the apple in two with a single shot.
The crowd erupted in cheers, and Tell became a symbol of Swiss resistance against Austrian rule. It's a great story full of drama and suspense. It's the kind of story that gets passed down through generations, becoming part of a nation's identity. But there's just one problem. There's no real evidence that any of it actually happened. Now, I love a good story as much as the next guy. But when it comes to history, we've got to be careful about separating fact from fiction. And in William Tell's case, the evidence just isn't there. For starters, the earliest written account of the William Tell story doesn't appear until almost 200 years after the events are supposed to have taken place. That's like me telling you a detailed story about something my great-great-grandparents did, with no written records to back it up. It's a bit of a stretch, right? Plus, similar stories of skilled archers shooting objects off people's heads appear in folklore from all over the world. There's a Norse version with the god Ulla, a Finnish tale with a character named Jukahainen, and even an English version featuring a guy named William of Cloudsley. So it's starting to look like the William Tell story might be more of a widespread motif, a common thread woven into the fabric of folklore, rather than a unique historical event. So, if the story of William Tell is likely a myth, why has it endured for so long? Why do we still tell this story, even though it probably never happened? Well, for one thing, it's a damn good story. It's got all the elements of a classic myth. A hero, a villain, a seemingly impossible task, and a triumphant ending. But beyond that, the story of William Tell speaks to something deeper. It represents the struggle against tyranny, the courage to stand up for what's right, even when facing impossible odds. It's a story about freedom, about self-determination, about the power of the human spirit. And those are themes that resonate with people across cultures and throughout history. So, even if William Tell never actually existed, his story continues to inspire us, to remind us that even the smallest among us can make a difference. Well, there you have it. Another episode of Mythbusters debunking common historical misconceptions. We tackled some tall tales today, from Napoleon's height to William Tell's sharpshooting skills. Remember, history is full of surprises, and sometimes the most well-known stories are more myth than reality. That's it for today's myth-busting adventure. History is fascinating, but it's important to separate fact from fiction. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more myth-busting content. And be sure to let me know in the comments down below what historical myths you'd like to see debunked next. Until then, stay curious, keep questioning, and never stop exploring the world around you. Subscribe for more content.